Hi, I'm Jackson Brer, and on this episode of Jumping with Jackson, the weather sucks, so instead of jumping, we are going to do sensory deprivation instead. That's our backup plan. I know it doesn't seem like it would make sense, but because one is an extreme thing that actually becomes super meditative, and the other is just straight up meditative, so that's the parallel I'm drawing.
Yep, I've done plenty of skydiving, and I have floated before. So this is going to be, I think, my third float.
This will be my first time doing it. It's something I've always been interested in doing. I do practice meditation from time to time. I'm not terribly good at it, but I'm not terribly bad at it. The thing about meditation is that as long as you're actively meditating, you're successfully meditating. I think a lot of people get hung up on the fact that they're bad at meditating, which then gets in the way of them successfully meditating. The other greatest piece of advice I had about meditation is if you ever reach a great meditative state, you can never attempt to get there again. You just have to let it happen, and if it does, you're back there. But the second you try to get back to that same meditative state, you're already getting in your own way because you are giving your brain a success and failure metric, exactly, and that just impedes your ability to be successful. So honestly, for anyone who's struggling with meditation, just start meditating, and even if your brain never quiets down, and even if you're never getting that like euphoric feeling that does occur when you successfully meditate, even if you're not getting there yet, you are still successfully meditating by the act of sitting quietly and trying to clear your brain.
See, I'm a bad meditator. I have to. For me personally, it's I like walking.
Oh, geez, thanks for bragging, man.
Sorry, but I'm not very good at sitting.
I am. I'm really good at that. There I go bragging again.
You go bragging.
Sorry.
But anyway, I have to it's like I feel like I hit that meditative state. It's a flow state for me.
Right. I mean, and I have had that with like mono skiing. If I'm hitting those moguls perfectly and I'm just like, bam, like I do understand that sort of like rhythmic body-mind connection. The easiest way to get out of your head is into your body. I understand that connection, and I understand how that helps.
And I understand how it's me being lazy.
Right. It is. You're being active. You're being physically active so that you can be more mentally lazy.
Yeah. That it's doing it the other way, where you would just sit there and just absorb the information. Or just do the meditating, which then is just playing with the information of your mind and nothing else. That's hard for me.
Yeah, well, it's hard for everyone. It takes practice. And again, the fact that you're not quote-unquote successfully doing it gets in a lot of people's way. But you are successfully doing it if you're attempting. The success is in the attempt, I think, is the best. That's the way that I got past my issues with meditation.
Yeah.
Was accepting that trying is a form of success.
Yeah, not giving yourself a success-failure metric, because whatever metric you're failing on is still success because you're doing the thing.
Right.
Did we check our audio levels? Sorry.
It's okay.
That's just, I think we're good. But anyway.
I think this might be adding some noise to it.
I think the fact that the tension's on there, it's translating some of the car noise a little bit more.
Yeah.
But we're still trying to figure out the mic here.
We're still working on some stuff, guys. Which is, you're along for the ride.
Who knew that sticking a microphone in a car and recording a podcast while driving down the freeway 50 miles an hour was a difficult thing to do?
I think people knew that, but we're exemplifying it again.
Yes. Here are the problems you run into. Bungee cords don't work.
Yeah, who knew?
Your ratchet strap and bungee cord combination will just have physics slapping you in the face.
Fucking physics.
So, I wanted to make up for what I think I failed as an interviewer on last episode, which is getting more into Jackson, talking more about Jackson, how Jackson got here, and why is this guy throwing himself out of an airplane? Yeah,
go ahead and ask me your questions. I will do my best to answer them.
So, how did you get cerebral palsy?
So the short answer is my birth mother was a drug addict, and I got cut out of her stomach, and there were complications, and it was a lack of oxygen when I was born. technically cerebral palsy is a form of brain damage. Haha. And so yeah, it's not degenerative. It stays the same. And it's actually, I believe, the most common disability for people in wheelchairs in America. I don't have hard data. I just know I played wheelchair basketball growing up, and so just for fun, I asked my coach, hey, what do the majority of kids have? And the most common was cerebral palsy, followed closely by spina bifida, and then everything else, amputee and spinal cord injury and all the others. But yeah, cerebral palsy seems to be the most common disability for people in wheelchairs, at least in my experience and what I've seen in my travels.
Yeah, so you were born this way.
I was.
That was one of the main things I wanted to get at.
So I didn't lose anything, which is an interesting thing, because what's harder, never having something or losing it later in life? And while I'm not able to answer because I only have my experience, I personally am like, well, I never lost anything. This is my normal. I've always been this way. So there is sort of an ease in that. Because when people ask, like, hey, how does it feel to walk? I'm like, I don't know. How does it feel for you to walk? Like...
Yeah, because you have no frame of reference.
Yeah, so there are questions that are pretty common for people to ask me that I'm like, I don't know how to answer your question.
Like what? What's the most common
like,
one?
Do your legs get tired? Sure, don't yours?
Yeah.
They just get tired more quickly. Does it hurt when you walk? Is pretty common. No, I mean, unless I walk for too long, and then yeah.
Which I think goes for everybody.
Right. So it's the way that I describe it is my body is kind of like the SUV of the human race. I burn through calories and I don't use my energy correctly. So everything, I use up more energy. It's more tiring. I have to eat. I have to take in more calories. I have to get more rest. So yeah, like my body is basically an SUV.
So you've got a lot going on there, but like what is, like, growing up in particular, I'm thinking about what, because I mean I know you well enough that I know some of the stories, but like what was the hardest part about growing up? Like what made it more difficult? What was hard and what was easy, actually, is a second.
Yeah, I mean, like I was always a sociable kid, I had a lot of friends and acquaintances, but one of the hardest things was nobody paid attention to accessibility. So like I was walking around my middle school with my friends, and they'd walk down the stairs, and I have to go around the whole campus to get to the one ramp. There were like 2 ramps in my 8th grade middle school, and one was on one side of campus and the other was on the other, but there were like, I swear I remember it as being like 8 different sets of stairs. So like my friends would go walk down to the basketball courts, and I'd have to like dip out and roll all the way to the other side of campus just to get back to them. And it's like, I mean, maybe
is this when you started jumping downstairs in a wheelchair? Is this where this began?
Actually, that was more like high school, when I started doing like going to skate parks in my wheelchair. And I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna jump down these stairs. And yeah, I did end up splitting my tires a few times and like popping them and like warping my wheel.
Yeah, I've seen how much you fucking ruin wheelchairs.
Well, I know but I'm telling them, they don't know.
Yeah, I was about
to
tell them even more. This guy fucking ruins wheelchairs like it's going out of style.
Yeah.
This guy fucking tears wheels off of them, fucking all kinds of shit.
Like, it's not, I'm just living my life. I feel like my wheelchair should keep up with me, and they tend not to. And like, maybe I should be gentle, but I'm like, but I want to live my life, and my wheelchair should be able to handle it.
And so far they have not built a Jackson-proof wheelchair.
Yeah, I mean, they survive longer than some survive longer than others, but I did there was one frame, and I swear it was supposed to be a bulletproof frame, supposed to never break, and I actually cracked the front metal bit.
You cracked the metal of an unbreakable.
In 2 places. And when the mechanic came, he looked at it and goes, "Were you in a car accident?" I was like, "No, I have cerebral palsy." He's like, "No, I know that. I meant in your chair. Was your wheelchair in a car accident?"
In a car that was in an accident.
I was like, "No, I jump off too many stages," because like a lot of like accessibility, right? Like I could bitch about accessibility, or I could perform at stages, and I'd rather get on stage and perform.
Just do it. Yeah,
and like
yeah.
I'm like, oh, I'll just jump off this stage, and that repetitive damage. It's like you can give yourself a concussion by tapping yourself in the forehead enough times. It's basically what I did in my wheelchair.
Yeah. So I want to keep doing that. I want to keep on the growing
Right.
up. Keep
so
going.
So growing
Well,
up. Oh,
If
yeah.
I can prompt you,
Sure.
because I know what your comedy is a lot about, and I know what that one woman's feedback about your comedy was the other day.
Hilarious.
That you need to talk more about sex. So I was wondering if you could talk about your sexuality growing up. Like, how do you,
So
when you're desexualized? Yeah, how do you?
yeah,
You can
like
can-
it was interesting because like in retrospect there were a lot of women in like even as far back as like elementary school and middle school who were interested in me, and like you look at your old yearbooks and you're like, oh my god, I'm such an idiot, how did I not realize this girl liked
Thought I
me?
was cute.
But like
Yeah.
I was so in my own head, and because Hollywood's
What do you mean? What do you mean you're in your own head? What were you thinking? What kind of stuff?
well, like Hollywood's portrayal of disabled people says disabled people are not sexy. No one wants. You never see a kid in a wheelchair with a girlfriend in media. Like even
Isn't that like Breaking Bad season? Took a couple seasons. They did eventually.
the entire series of Breaking Bad. This is a great example.
It has one episode or something.
No, it has 0 episodes with him having a girlfriend. So
God.
here's a story where they actually hire a real disabled person. They don't do the Macaulay Culkin thing of just hiring an able-bodied person to play a disabled person. Maybe that's offensive, guys. Maybe. Just saying. Might be sort of like, oh, maybe you should find a disabled actor. Maybe Hollywood. Try harder. But they actually
screaming.
found. Sorry, they actually found a disabled. They actually found a disabled actor. 5 seasons of the show. He's in high school the entire time. He never once has a girlfriend. Name one other show on television ever where there was an attractive male character who never once had a girlfriend. It's never happened in the history of cinema. And like, oh, but Hollywood's passively saying cripples don't have sex, don't have girlfriends, they're not sexually active in any way.
I think not just Hollywood saying that. I think that's a pretty common thing that. I mean, I've heard the questions that you have to field to even be considered on the sexual playing field.
Right.
But a lot of people up front don't know, they don't understand your sexuality at all.
Like Professor X's thing, where in like Professor X was the first disabled, like he was the first fictional character that I could be like, hey, he looks like me from the spokes down. Like I get it. And even him, like Professor X has the ability to talk to people's brains. He could literally give a woman the best orgasm of her life with his mind, but he never has a girlfriend except for Moira, who dates him when he's not paralyzed. Then in the movie, he actually wipes her brain of the memory of him. For what reason? Because he got shot? Which is a really common trope in movies and TV, and it pisses me off because I'm like, oh yeah, sure, you get shot in the spine and that kills your sexuality. That's a thing. Yeah, perpetuate that, Hollywood. Good job.
Interesting, yeah.
And
I mean, it's stuff that a lot of people don't think about.
Right, and it's
so blatant,
and it's ubiquitous too. Like even and you're like, oh, that was a while ago, Jackson. Haven't things gotten better? Nope. I just watched Black Lightning, which is a cool, CW comic book show, and one of the characters, her boyfriend, gets shot in the spine, and then they break up over it, and you're like, yeah, that's okay, good job, well done, show. The only media that I can think of that actually does a good job is Friday Night Lights. And they make it like basically the plot of the entire first season is like the star quarterback getting paralyzed, and actually like what that does to his relationships and what that does with him and his girlfriend, and like it was actually done with like nuance and care.
Yeah.
So like that was
the story as opposed to it being a backdrop or a side note or.
And then like even a show that I love, like Shameless, fucks it up, where like Debbie's relationship with this disabled dude is completely asymmetric and not at all like a good relationship for him, and she's basically just using the poor guy. and like it just bothers me. Like
I'm not familiar with that one. What is the?
Like
What do you mean it's asymmetric? What kind of stuff?
like she there's a line that she says where she's like, you know, like, we can't have sex, but like he can watch me masturbate, and like, do you think he's ever gonna get anything better than that? And I'm watching this show and going, yes, of course he can get something better than that. Like, that's such a low bar, and you think that's the best he can do? Fuck off. And like,
Yeah.
that's terrible. Like, that's, and I, granted, like, Shameless has done a great job with a bunch of other marginalized groups, and then they just like shoot themselves in the foot when talking about disabled people. They're like, wow, way to fail. Like, and fail hard too. Like,
Yeah, no, it seems like in our current call-out culture, it's a glaring, obvious one. There's no real missing that one.
and then what's also humorous is like, I'll be at you know, a show or doing a thing, and like sometimes women will be like very interested in this stuff, and they're like, oh yeah, cool. And then other times I'll bring something up about sexuality, and they're like, oh, no one assumes that. Like, people don't assume you're paralyzed, or people don't assume this about you. And it's
They
like,
do.
it's like you don't, but you cannot speak for all people. And
Many people do.
I, like, believe it or not, I have more experience with what people assume about me than you do.
Yeah.
You know.
So, I met up with you in college, which we already covered in the previous episode.
Sure.
But I don't know. I guess I was moving to ask about what's going on with your career, what's going on with you in your life, that making a show about jumping out of airplanes and going in deprivation tanks and such is the next. Why is that the move? How did we get here?
I think I got here because I was really interested in the idea of helping people do stuff that is outside of their comfort zone. And then, like, I have a lot of really talented friends, and I'm like, wait, it would be cool if I take these talented people and put them in a situation that's very atypical for their normal day-to-day life, and then see what they get out of it. Because, you know, it actually gives a common baseline of like, well, we just had the exact same experience. How do you process it?
Yeah, and yet reality is different for each person.
Right.
And so, you know, each person's who they were building up to that moment affects a lot how they perceive the experience.
Yeah, and I have
But we
some.
certainly have some crazy friends.
We do, and I think what's great is the people who are like, the immediate yeses are very interesting, and the immediate nos are interesting. You're like, oh, you're never doing this, and then like, oh, that was easy. Like, you're definitely gonna come. And then there's the people in the middle where it's like, oh, hey, you want to do this? And then I tell them it's like, oh no, we're doing a show. And then it's like, oh wait, if it's like gonna be a thing, I'll do it. Like.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm enabling you. Good job. Like,
Yeah, if anything we can do to trick creative people into getting a skydiving experience, I think is a positive.
I like the idea of using what I'm good at, which is talking, to, you know, make art. Like, I'm a poet, I'm a comedian, I do storytelling. So I'm like, why not find a thing that will like foster new experiences for other people. And, you know, I like this idea. I like the idea of skydiving for a living. I fall out of airplanes for a living. That's the goal, is to get.
We're trying to figure out how to make that work.
Yeah. It's an
Hopefully you find people had something to do with it.
yeah, you know, like, hey, we'll have Patreon and Kickstarter and all the things, and like, please give us money, like.
Yeah, so we can jump out of airplanes for a living.
Yeah. And
That's
like,
cool.
art is my favorite. Like, I love being able to do this stuff, like getting on a stage and talking with people and having that moment of like, oh, I never thought about it this way. Like, that's one of my favorite things about performing.
It's one of my favorite things about being your friend.
Thanks, man.
Jackson very often will say something and it gives me pause. I have to stop and go, what the fuck did he just say? Give me a second. I need to assimilate that information.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let that shit land. Because, I mean, you do have such a different perspective that growing up in the wheelchair, I think it has made you an incredible listener and speaker. That Those are some great talents of yours.
Yeah, the interesting thing of like there's people talk about fight or flight, but they forget about befriend and freeze, because those are the other two options in the terrified moment when you're afraid of something. So there's fight or flight, and that's the like survival mechanism, but there's also befriend and freeze. So like, oh, this adversarial relationship, maybe I can turn them into an ally, and then I am no longer in danger. And there's also freeze, where you're like, I'm just gonna be as still as possible, and maybe I'll be ignored.
I ran into a snake on the trail yesterday. That's exactly what it did. It scared the shit out of me.
Right. And I think that it's interesting how many people don't realize and aren't taught that befriend and freeze are still on that continuum of what you do when you're afraid. And I think
so many people default to fight or flight.
In retrospect, befriending people is my first line of defense in my life.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would consider those on a different tier or something. That like the other two are so knee jerk.
Right. One, like, I can't run, so I do fight. Like, I fight with my words, but I fight, and I also like don't. It is interesting to me.
How do you think that changes your relationship with fear?
Like, I am much more accepting of this is going, like, there are times when I just can't avoid damage. I am going to be hurt by this situation. There's nothing I can do to avoid it. And that's just the acceptance that I have.
You've had to learn to accept the fear.
No, to accept damage, that I will be damaged.
But I was asking you about fear.
Right. Well, okay, so
why did damage come up with fear?
Because for the most part, I don't know if this is everyone's experience, but I think a lot of people's fear is a fear of outcome and therefore a fear of damage. Like, why are you afraid of jumping out of an airplane? Oh, I might die. Why are you afraid of jumping downstairs? I might get hurt. Why are you afraid of talking to that pretty girl? She might reject me. Why are you afraid of driving really fast? I might get paralyzed. Like, you're afraid of damage.
Fear of pain.
No, damage to your life, like damage, like the
actual damage. Okay,
like,
gotcha.
Cause like, yeah, getting rejected by a girl doesn't.
You're circling around where I was trying to lead you to.
Oh.
Do you see where I was trying to land you on? Fear. You have a different relationship with fear because of this.
Yeah, I guess it is an acceptance. Like, things will happen, and there's nothing I can do about them. And I think a lot of people lie to themselves about how much control they have over their lives, and that actually leads them to a lot of unhappiness, because they lie to themselves. They tell themselves, all of this is under my purview. And like, sure, we have a lot of agency in our lives, but there's a lot of stuff where you're just along for the ride. One of my favorite things about having people go tandem jumping is that you're in someone else's hands, and you have to accept that. I think that's really good for able-bodied people, because that's day-to-day experience for anybody who's disabled.
That you have to place so much trust in somebody else just for your existence.
Right, and it's like, deal with it. It's good for you. Process that.
Be on the roller coaster. Don't be the roller coaster.
Yeah. It's And then,
Well, what do you think about that in relationship to meditating and what we're doing today? That a lot of people, and myself included, I think I'm scared to start meditating. I think that is an intimidating prospect to me, and it just seems pretty unattainable. And
in meditation, you're purposefully not hiding from whatever thoughts you're like. Last night when I was meditating, I went to some pretty dark places before I got to the silence that I was looking for, of like, peaceful quietness. But like, you have to, whatever thought you're like using your loud life and your talking voice and your inner monologues to ignore, that will bubble to the surface at some point. If you meditate for long enough or frequently enough, you will arrive at the thing you're hiding from. And
And then what? And then what do you do?
You process it. You come to some acceptance, or you get kicked out of the meditation by your own brain. Your brain goes like, and then you're like, well, now I'm going to think about something else.
Yeah.
But letting the thought, like, the other thing about meditation is you can let the thought happen. You just don't dwell on the thought.
Yeah, you let it go by.
It's just you're a hand. Your brain is your hand sifting through sand, and you can't grasp the sand. You have to just let the sand flow through your fingers. And there's actually this beautiful feeling. It's actually pretty analogous to that, where you're just the feeling of your thoughts not sticking to you and just passing through your brainscape. That's really nice. That's a very pleasant feeling when you get there.
Yeah, I think this might be a good spot to end part 1. What do you think?
Yeah, works for me.
We're about to get off our exit, just a few minutes away, and we're gonna go float in some tanks.
Yeah, do the Cheater's Guide to Meditation.
And then we're gonna get back together with you afterwards and let you guys know how it went.
Cool.
Go float in tanks, jump out of airplanes.
Do things that make you uncomfortable. It's good for you.
Bye.
Bye. So,
we just got out of the float tank. Welcome back, everybody. Feeling pretty fucking mellow.
Did the thing, man. Yeah, how was your experience, man?
It's good.
Don't
damn it.
Don't do that.
Sorry, hit the mic. It's crazy to me that floating in a tank and meditating is a learned skill.
For sure. Tell me about the trying to, like, what we were talking about, how you had that cool experience and then you couldn't.
So I had this experience where once your body kind of forgets its spatial awareness and forgets its surroundings, kind of the point of the sensory deprivation. One of the things that happened for me was that my brain lost track of scale, and so it started guessing. And so all of a sudden I had this hallucinogenic experience that my head's massive, my body's massive, and they're like, it's just shuffling and trying to figure out. It doesn't know how big what is, and it's making wrong guesses, and it just feels like everything's growing and shrinking. It's like tripping. Yeah. But I kind of wanted to experience it again afterwards because it was like a weird little roller coaster.
Right, and so you're trying to get back to that experience.
Yeah, and it just doesn't, you can't do it. You cannot force going back to it. You're just like, okay, just got to sit here and wait for whatever comes, because whatever it is going to be what it is. And there's no way that I can, just because I want that, doesn't mean I'm going to get it.
Yeah, in fact, the exact opposite. Because you want it, you almost certainly won't get it.
Yeah. That's like, I went into ayahuasca wanting the death experience. I didn't get that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Poor you.
Poor me.
Yeah, my experience is a lot more mellow, I think. I didn't really get any extreme stuff. I was chasing after an experience, so I kind of limited myself because I was like, okay, try not to. But then in the back of my brain, I kind of was. I did get this cool motion thing where, like, I felt like everything was moving, like, that I was, like, shifting through space. And then, like...
Which directions did you get it?
I got left and right a lot. When I was going up and down, I actually was moving, and then I bumped the tank. Okay. And so, like, I tried to center myself, and then I had this
That is a problem, right?
Hold on, let me talk. I had this cool thing where I like bumped the side, and so I pushed myself back, and eventually I got to the feeling of like, oh, I'm a nucleus of a molecule. I am made of molecules. I am the molecule, like I'm analogous to the molecules that make up myself, and I am alone in the universe. There's all this empty space, and there's nothing between me and nothing except more nothingness. It's okay. That's fine. That's how the world exists. We are all made up of mostly nothing, and electrons moving very rapidly. That was cool.
Yeah, I get that. I get the moving thing as well. Sometimes I get this, the way that I experience that sort of thing is it kind of feels like I'm standing on some sort of precipice or something.
Right.
And but there's no gravity. And like the universe is out in front of me, and yeah, you can profoundly feel nothingness. I get that part. I didn't get the atom thing. I think that was sort of your experience.
Yeah, that was more, that was me accepting that I was going to still remain in my head for a little bit longer. And so I was like, okay, where does this thought trail go? And so it wasn't this meditative deep understanding. It was more of a purposeful exploration meditation, where I was like, all right, let's delve into this existential idea.
Yeah.
And so I was basically guiding my own meditation because I wanted to go somewhere. And so I didn't get as much of the psychotropic meditation that you're talking about. I got more of a like heady sort of like cool understanding of the self.
But you're able to get to the place where you are able to take advantage of the sensory deprivation, right?
Yeah, and I did have one really cool part where I saw like moving shapes and colors, like, but that was only for a couple of seconds.
Because you did get some visuals.
But that was, I got there and I was so excited that I took myself out of it.
Yeah.
But I was like, I did get there, and then I touched my eye and I had to rinse off. So then I was starting back from neutral.
Yeah, that's one of the things about it is you really have to be patient with it and kind of fixing some of those things. There were debate moments that I got into of like, do I want to adjust this thing because then I'm going to undo
all the work I've done. But I can't think of it as work because that'll take me out of the experience as well.
Right, so you've got all this time invested to get the payoff, and you have to debate whether you're going to fix the physical. Like for me, it was the head donut.
Are you going to shift your experience and start from scratch again, or are you going to accept your experience as it is?
Yeah, with discomfort or whatever's bothering you.
Yeah, hooray for metaphors.
It's a difficult thing to decide when you're in a tank and you're paying by the minute.
It's a difficult thing to decide in life. It's just a microcosm of life experience.
Right. What about one of the other things I thought was really interesting for me is I find my body and my mind fighting it, wanting me to get out of it. Like I would have a thought, or I would have some of that motion shift.
Yeah.
And the motion shift would get to the point where I would jump to catch myself.
Gotcha.
Like I had one where I was shifting on like a yaw axis, so I was like tilting forward.
Yeah.
And you have to like, whoa, catch yourself to fall, but you're not falling.
Yeah, I actually did this thing where I pushed my arms all the way down, knowing that they would spring back up. Yeah. And that got me to thinking about like the nature of understanding, how like normally we're on this very surface level of understanding, but like we can force a deeper understanding with a lot of effort and a lot of work. But without effort and work, we spring back to this neutral surface level understanding.
Mm. And you kind of don't really stay there. The spiritual stuff is kind of inherently temporary. Yeah. I mean, you can work on it a lot and cultivate it so that temporary lasts for a long time.
Yeah.
But that it is still, it's like a muscle. It's going to atrophy.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I basically was playing with the sensory deprivation tank as a tool for guided meditation for myself. Like it was more of a internal like self-reflection rather than a universe expanding thing, because that's the other experience I hear people talk about. It's like this universal expansion idea of like I'm one with all things and
all things are one with me.
Yeah.
I am just another molecule in the universe. But you did have some of that,
right? And that was like an active choice. So like I think that's the difference. Is like I actually knew what I wanted to get, and so I was able to like guide myself in that direction in a gentle way, which actually did detract from some of the experience, because I was like, okay, I'm going to purposefully think and on these things that I've been debating with, and kind of yeah. So it was interesting. It was definitely a unique experience, and I think doing it again is probably good because you kind of know more. But as far as a first experience for me, it was good, positive experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just checking the audio levels and stuff. Sorry.
It's all right.
Yeah, it looks fine to me. What else do we want to talk about? Was that it?
I mean, it's not as it's definitely not as intense. It's more of a like.
It's a slow burn.
Yeah, and like, that was another thing. It's like that floating feeling. I was like, it is a little bit like skydiving. I wish I could do it face down though.
To compare.
Because it's like that is the comparative like body position.
Yeah.
And like, if only we could breathe water, because like, if you had a snorkel, it would take you out of it, because you'd have the
You
snorkel
have to hold on to
deal
the
with.
snorkel. Yeah, you'd have to have muscles doing stuff for snorkeling.
But it would be cool if you could do that.
They have a snorkel mask. I guess you could do it with that.
I guess so, but then you'd still have it on your face.
And you'd have to shave your beard to get a good seal.
Yeah, but just thoughts I had. I did have a mild thought of like, this is kind of like floating through the air.
It does. The floating sensation, I think, is one of the weird parallels between these two activities. That terminal velocity is strange to your body because your acceleration downwards equals the force of the wind upwards, and that's just... It ends up making it feel like you're floating in comparison to the people flying around you, even though you're falling at however many miles per hour.
Yeah.
And then in this case, I had a point where the water and the air are such a same temperature. I had my hands kind of near my waist, and I could not tell if they were under the water or not.
Oh, yeah, I had that same experience. It was weird. That's actually the first time I pushed my hands down, and then I had that, like, sort of,
Yeah, I think that means you're doing it right, because if you're stationary long enough, then the exposed skin dries.
Right.
And it gets comfortable with the air temperature, and the skin that's under the water matches temperature with the water, and then you even lose the tactile understanding of where the surface is, and then that complete disorientation is kind of like that's where your brain takes over and starts throwing shit at you.
Yeah. I want to do it again, because I did kind of like, I wanted to get more out of it, which got less out of it because of that want. Like, it was like...
Yeah, it probably would have gone better if you had expected nothing and taken what you got instead of wanting it.
Yeah.
Wanting something specific. And that's one of the big things I think about a lot of these expansive hallucinogenic sort of experiences, that if you expect something or you want something or you're targeting something, that definitely changes the trajectory.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting that, like, the willful wanting often pushes that very thing away from you.
Yeah.
So,
I think that is an analogy for life too, that there's some truth to that, where going to want something and get it can sometimes make it just squeeze away just by doing that.
Yeah.
And the understanding of what the actual activity to get the thing that you want to come closer, to figure out what that activity is often difficult. And yeah, I mean, I think this is definitely something, especially people who have struggled with like meditation and like stuff. It's good for mindfulness. Like, it helps. Like, it's definitely meditation training wheels.
Yeah.
You're getting freaking forced into it. You don't have an option.
Yeah, it's cool. Good experience.
All right.
Well, this was a very different episode.
Yeah. Which is good. We're getting started. We're figuring it out. Got us a chance to do all these things and go swim around in some float tanks.
Yeah.
And what are we doing next? We're either throwing Zach Wiseman out of a plane or
Dre.
We got a couple people lined up.
Yeah, we have some people lined up.
So as soon as the weather gets good,
we're gonna throw friends out of here.
We're going back to the original plan. We're throwing friends out of the plane. So stand by for that. Thank you for watching, everybody.
Yeah. Take care. Jump again.
Jump. Yes. Do tank things. Bye.
Also that.